They say the dead can't defend themselves. I used to think that was just something people said at funerals until I watched my mother's name get buried deeper than her body. I was 16 when she died. Pneumonia, they said. A week in the hospital, then nothing. One day she was laughing at the kitchen table. The next she was a framed photo on the mantel. But in Maplewood, death wasn't the end. It was gossip's favorite appetizer. At the funeral, I heard whispers. She was seeing her boss, wasn't she? They say she stole from the charity fund. Poor Richard. Imagine being married to that kind of woman. Richard, my father, the man who stood beside the casket with dry eyes and a new cologne. When I confronted him that night, his answer was a blade dressed as calm. People talk, Lily, he said. It doesn't matter now. It matters to me, I told him. He looked away. Let it go. But how do you let go of the only person who ever made you feel seen? 2 months later, he introduced me to Evelyn. She was everything my mother wasn't. Polished, composed, always with that smile that never reached her eyes. Your father and I found comfort in each other, she told me. I didn't answer. Comfort was her word for convenience. By the time she moved in, the town had accepted her like they'd been waiting for her all along. She baked for church fundraisers, hosted garden brunches, and spoke about healing as if she'd invented it. And then one night, while I was cleaning out Mom's old desk, I found a letter, half finished, never sent. It was to a friend from church. My mother had written, Evelyn's been spreading stories again. I don't know why she hates me so much, but it's getting worse. People at work are starting to look at me differently. I stopped breathing. Evelyn, the name hit like a memory I'd buried alive. Evelyn used to work at the same real estate firm as my mother. Her assistant, actually. The one who used to show up uninvited to our house with casseroles and concern. I remembered Mom once telling me, she wants everything I have, even the life I built. Now, reading that letter years later, I understood. Evelyn hadn't just comforted my father after Mom's death. She'd cleared the path long before it. She'd poisoned my mother's reputation until she was alone, disbelieved, and broken. The next morning, I went to the kitchen. Evelyn stood by the stove, humming softly while flipping pancakes. The smell of butter filled the air. My father was already gone for work. I studied her. The perfect posture, the pearls, the careful lipstick. She turned, smiling like nothing had ever happened. Good morning, Lily, she said. Morning, I replied, matching her tone. I slid into a chair. I found one of Mom's letters last night. Her hand froze midair, just for a second. Then she laughed, light and practiced. Oh, she loved writing. Such imagination. Yeah, I said quietly. She mentioned you. That smile faltered, barely but enough. Oh, I'm sure it was nothing important. It was, I said, meeting her eyes. She said you were spreading rumors about her. The silence was sharp enough to cut. Then she sighed, soft and pitying, like a teacher indulging a child. Lily, grief does strange things to people. Your mother wasn't well toward the end. You can't believe everything she wrote. And just like that, she turned back to the stove. Conversation over. But I saw the tremor in her hand, the smallest crack in her porcelain act. That was the moment I knew. She had done it. She had destroyed my mother, not with poison or bullets, but with words, with whispers. I went upstairs, sat on my bed, and stared at the ceiling until the afternoon light turned gold. My heartbeat was steady. No tears, no screaming. Just a quiet, chilling resolve spreading through me like smoke. Evelyn had used gossip as a weapon, and I would do the same. But I wouldn't confront her. That would make me look bitter, unstable, exactly what she'd made my mother look like. No, I'd be careful, subtle, smiling, just like her. She taught me the rules. Now I'd teach her the consequences. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed her words. You can't believe everything she wrote. A smile crept across my face. You're right, Evelyn, I whispered to the dark. But they'll believe everything I say. And in that silence, I began to plan her downfall, one rumor at a time. I learned early that poison isn't always liquid. Sometimes it is a look, a pause, the careful pronunciation of a name. Evelyn wielded both like a surgeon. I decided to learn the same instruments, not because I wanted to be her, but because she taught me the language of ruin and I had to speak it back. The first rule was observation. I watched her from the edges of my life, like a camera lens focusing on a subject that had never noticed it was being filmed. She had rituals: lemon tea at 9, calls to Linda at 11, a walk around the park at 3 with a neighbor's small dog that she stroked as if rehearsing affection. People trusted routine. Routine made a person predictable, and thus vulnerable. My mother had trusted people in the same way. She'd believed in explanations because she wanted everyone to be better than they were. That was her softness, and it had cost her everything. My method was quiet. I wasn't a storm. I was a steady drip that would eventually hollow stone. The first drip was a bracelet. I found it in the bottom drawer of my mother's desk. A thin gold chain with a tiny locket, tarnished at one hinge. I wore it for a day, the metal cool against my throat, and watched what it did to me. It made me feel anchored. It made me remember Mom's laugh, how she would tap the locket when she was thinking about a recipe or a sermon. At the Saturday farmers market, where the town came in layers of Sunday best and hand-me-downs, I accidentally dropped the bracelet near Evelyn's table. She'd set up a small stand that week for a church bake sale. A display of cupcakes iced in pastel, and a bowl of pamphlets for the Women's Wellness Circle. She bent to tie a ribbon. I bent to pretend to tie mine. Linda, who never missed a social event, stooped beside me. "Oh, that's lovely," Linda said, picking up the locket. Her voice was bright, as if gossip were a shared hobby. "Is that yours?" I smiled like a practiced actress. "It was my mother's. It got misplaced." Linda's head tilted. "Evelyn said she never took charity funds. She said a lot of things," I interrupted softly. "But Claire used to have one of these too. She wore it all the time. Strange how things go missing after people get uncomfortable, isn't it?" I let my sentence hang like a question. In Maplewood, hints were tendrils. They reached and found the dry places in people's minds and rooted there. By Monday, the church bulletin mentioned a small theft at the fund bake sale. Evelyn's eyes were smaller at choir practice, her hands folding hymnals with more force than necessary. I watched the way her laugh cracked when someone referenced the fundraiser. A seed had been planted, not in the ground, but in the mouths of the right people. From there, I escalated in ways that felt surgical. A misplaced voicemail that suggested Evelyn had argued about money with the treasurer. A casual remark to a neighbor that Evelyn had been seen counting envelopes in the parsonage. An anonymous email to the town's gossip column with a blurred photo of Evelyn leaving the church office at odd hours. None of it proved anything. Proof wasn't necessary. Doubt was the currency I used. It came with moral cost. At night, I would lie awake and listen to my own breathing, and sometimes the rhythm sounded like my mother's, and I felt ashamed for how easily I'd traded grief for strategy. I told myself it was for Claire, that this was justice, but sometimes when I stared at my reflection in the black window of the living room, I recognized a stranger, lips pressed in the same way Evelyn's were when she smiled, the same steady calm. I would correct my posture, as if that could reorder the pieces of who I used to be. The town's social life is a fragile web. Pull one thread, and the movement travels. Evelyn began to notice. little things at first. A canceled lunch, a chair left empty at book club. Once, in the grocery aisle, a woman pretended not to see her when she reached for the same jar of coffee. The look on Evelyn's face was a shutter clicking shut. Surprise, then calculation, then the slow thing I lived for. Fear. She started to fight back, predictably. She cornered Dad in the garage one afternoon, and their argument drifted like low thunder through the house. I stood on the stairs and pretended to read a magazine, small and useless and invisible. "You started all this, didn't you?" Evelyn's voice was low and sharp when she left the room. "You're the one whispering." Dad's reply was a weak animal sound. "Lily, this isn't," he began, and then he looked at me. For a second, his eyes held a question I couldn't answer without giving away the entire map I had drawn in my head. I kept my face blank. I had to keep the secret. Secrecy was the armor I chose. The second rule I'd learned: make them doubt their own memories. If a woman had spent years convincing a town of lies, she had exploited its hunger to believe bad stories about others. I fed that hunger just enough that Evelyn felt it clawing at her every dinner, every coffee. People who had applauded her last year now murmured about her motives. She tried to apologize publicly at the church coffee hour, her voice trembling, the words gloved and manufactured. Apologies in Maplewood are currency. They can buy you back a reputation if they're sincere. Hers weren't. Then came the night I did something I still tasted like iron when I thought about it. I sent an anonymous letter to the church board with a copy of a pay stub, doctored to show a diversion of funds. Not real, but plausible. The sort of detail that makes suspicion bloom into conviction. I watched the next morning as the board members exchanged folded looks, as Evelyn's name was mentioned with new venom. Later, curled on my mother's old couch, I thought of Mom's handwriting in that unsent letter and felt a coldness slide down my spine. Revenge doesn't roar. It whispers until the whispers become a chorus. My chorus had begun. I was both the conductor and, increasingly, the orchestra. Just when I thought I could breathe, when the town's eyes had turned in Evelyn's direction and she seemed unmoored, I overheard something that made the air itself change. It was 3 a.m. The house slept in grease-silver shadows. I hadn't meant to be awake, but faint light had drawn me downstairs. From the hallway, I could hear the soft click of Evelyn's phone. She held it to her ear in the dimness, whispering in a voice I had never heard before, not polished, but raw. "Just make sure Richard signs it tomorrow," she heard herself say. "He's got the papers. Don't let Lily find out. I don't want anyone to know about the—" Her voice stopped, but my heart did not. I pressed myself to the wall, the wood cold under my palm, and felt the little island of certainty I had been building tilt and list. There were papers. There was a plan. Evelyn wasn't just trying to destroy my mother's memory. She was arranging property, signatures, futures, and suddenly my revenge felt too small, like slapping at a shadow that was about to swallow us all. I had started a war with a woman who had been planning her own moves for years. The house, which had felt predictable and bare a moment before, hummed with new danger. I realized then that whatever I did next needed to be smarter than whispers. And then, very softly, as if to herself, Evelyn said, "You were supposed to be the easy part." Her last words floated down the hallway and lodged in my chest like a thrown stone. By late August, the town of Maplewood had learned to lower its voice when Evelyn Mercer walked into a room. She still smiled, she always smiled, but her hands trembled slightly when she held her coffee mug, and her laugh had developed a crack in it, like porcelain under strain. The woman who once lectured others about grace and dignity now lived on the edge of suspicion, and I had put her there, It started with the bracelet rumor, and from there, every whisper found a way to grow. People began noticing details that had always been there: a missing receipt from the church fundraiser, a late payment on the women's club account, a too familiar glance toward a married realtor during community meetings. I didn't need to invent much. All I did was feed the little fires Evelyn had left behind. The beauty of social destruction is that you don't have to burn the whole house. Just make people smell smoke. It was the morning of the town's annual charity gala, the same event Evelyn had hosted for years, back when people still believed every word that left her mouth. I'd volunteered to help with decorations, a convenient way to stay close. The church hall smelled of polished wood and lilies. I watched Evelyn move among the tables, giving orders, trying to hold on to her fading authority. Her pearl earrings caught the light as she smiled at people who no longer smiled back. Linda approached her, arms crossed. "Did you ever sort out that thing with the donations, Evelyn?" she asked, too loudly for a friend. Evelyn's face tightened. "What thing?" "Oh, just something the treasurer mentioned," Linda said. "Something about funds not matching up. I'm sure it's nothing." But Linda didn't sound sure, and the people within earshot didn't look away. I saw it in Evelyn's eyes, that flicker of panic she couldn't quite hide. When she caught me watching, I smiled gently, the way a daughter might. "You okay?" I asked. She hesitated. "Just a long day." "You've been having a lot of those lately," I said softly, and walked away before she could respond. The gala began at 7 sharp. Fairy lights twinkled across the ceiling. The orchestra tuned quietly in the corner. Evelyn, in her emerald dress, took the stage to give the opening speech. She started strong, gracious, polished, practiced. But as she thanked donors and recited her well-worn lines about community trust, the crowd remained stiff, polite, unmoved. Then a sound broke through the room, the faint ping of a phone notification, followed by another and another. Dozens of people began glancing at their screens, murmuring. I knew what they were seeing. Earlier that afternoon, I had sent a series of anonymous emails to the Maplewood social group, screenshots of a supposed bank statement showing Evelyn's name next to a transfer from the charity's account. It was fake, of course, but believable enough to do its job. I watched her from across the room. Her voice faltered mid-sentence. The microphone caught the shake in her tone. What's happening?" she stammered, her eyes darting across the crowd. Whispers rippled through the audience. Words like embezzlement, fraud, and betrayal moved faster than the music ever could. She stepped back from the podium, her face pale, her lips trembling. For the first time, Evelyn Mercer didn't look composed. She looked small. She scanned the room and found me. Our eyes met. For a moment, everything else went silent. The laughter, the whispers, the shuffling, all gone. It was just her and me, and the weight of everything that had brought us here. Her lips formed the question I had been waiting for. Why? I didn't speak. I just held her gaze, then gave the faintest smile. The same smile she'd worn the day she told me, "Your mother wasn't well." It hit her like recognition. She turned abruptly, leaving the stage, her heels clacking against the wooden floor, too fast, too loud. The audience stared. Some pitied her, others smelled blood. I followed her outside. She stood by her car, the night air cold against her bare arms. The streetlight painted her face in harsh yellow. "Lily," she said, her voice breaking, "you've been doing this to me, haven't you?" I didn't answer. She stepped closer. "You think this will bring her back? You think destroying me will fix what you lost?" The wind rustled the trees behind us. The sound reminded me of my mother's voice, soft, almost warning. You ruined her, I said finally. My voice was low, steady. You made people believe she was crazy, dishonest. You killed her name before she even died. Evelyn shook her head, tears threatening. I made mistakes, Lily, but I never meant— I cut her off. You meant everything you said. You meant every lie you told. You built your life on them. She stared at me, eyes glistening. And what are you building yours on now? For a second, her question hit something deep, something I didn't want to feel, because she was right. My revenge had become my heartbeat, and I didn't know who I was without it, but I pushed the thought away. Enjoy the silence, Evelyn, I said quietly. You taught me how powerful it can be. I turned and walked back inside, leaving her under the buzzing streetlight, shaking. That night, Maplewood found a new story to tell, not about Claire Mercer's madness, but about Evelyn's downfall. By morning, the charity board had suspended her. By evening, she had resigned. Every rumor I'd planted bloomed into truth. And by the time anyone realized none of it could be proven, it didn't matter anymore. Because in this town, rumors don't need proof, they just need believers. Evelyn was finished, or so I thought, because 2 days later, I received an envelope on my doorstep. No return address, just my name written in elegant handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper, one sentence. You're not the only one who knows how to whisper. The handwriting was hers, and for the first time since I'd started, I felt something I hadn't felt in years— fear. The envelope changed everything. I remember sitting at my kitchen table that morning, sunlight spilling across the wood, my coffee turning cold. The note lay open in front of me, just one sentence, written in her elegant, looping handwriting. You're not the only one who knows how to whisper. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. I'd spent months tearing Evelyn apart piece by piece, never once considering that she might learn from me. But she had. She always did. The first whisper came 2 days later. At the grocery store, a woman I barely knew, one of Evelyn's bridge club friends, gave me a look that lingered too long. When I smiled, she smiled back too brightly. By the time I reached the checkout, I heard my own name in the next aisle. Poor thing, one voice said. Still not over her mother's breakdown. Or maybe she's more like her than she thinks, another replied, lower, with pity in it. I froze. The plastic bag in my hand crinkled. Evelyn was telling my story now, and people were listening. By the following week, I couldn't escape it. My coworkers avoided eye contact. The PTA president forgot to include me in the next meeting. Even friends who'd once joined me for coffee seemed to drift away. Everywhere I went, I felt the air shift when I entered, the same way it had for Evelyn just weeks ago. I'd turned her into a ghost. Now she was making me one. I realized something then. Revenge doesn't stop when you win. It lingers. It echoes. It eats. Still, I refused to lose. If she wanted whispers, I'd give her screams. It was the evening of the fall banquet, another Maplewood tradition. One Evelyn had once ruled like a queen. This time, she wasn't invited, but I was. I walked into the hall wearing the same shade of emerald she'd worn at the gala, a small, cruel tribute. The night buzzed with gossip, and I knew half of it was about me. Still, I smiled, laughed, played my part. If I was going to fall, I'd do it on my own terms. Then I saw her. Evelyn stood near the entrance, uninvited, calm as glass. She wore black, understated, simple, but her eyes held that familiar cold gleam of someone who'd already planned her next move. She approached slowly, heels clicking against the floor. People stepped aside without realizing they were doing it. Even ruined, she carried presence like perfume. Beautiful dress, she said. Yours looked better. I replied. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. You've made quite the impression lately. Shame people are starting to wonder if maybe your mother wasn't the only one who lost her balance. I felt heat rise up my neck. You really can't help yourself, can you? Oh, Lily, she said softly. Neither can you. She leaned in close enough that I could smell her perfume, jasmine and smoke. You thought revenge would make you feel powerful, but it only made you like me. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Then I laughed, quietly, bitterly. Maybe that's exactly what I wanted, to understand how someone could be so good at destroying lives. And, she asked, it's easier than I thought. I left her standing there and walked to the stage. The microphone waited, gleaming under the lights. This was where she used to stand, center of every room, voice like honey. Now it was my turn. I tapped the mic, silencing the crowd. Good evening, everyone, I began. My voice was steady. Before we start, I think it's time we talk about something real, about the kind of people we choose to believe. Dozens of eyes turned toward me. I saw Evelyn at the back, her expression unreadable. I've made mistakes, I said, and so have others. But the truth is, Maplewood runs on gossip, on half-truths, whispers, and the stories we invent when silence feels too heavy. My mother was destroyed by lies. Then I destroyed someone else with the same poison. The room was dead quiet. I won't ask for forgiveness, I continued, but I want you to know, if you've heard something about me or her or anyone else, maybe stop and ask who benefits when you believe it. I looked straight at Evelyn when I said it. Her face didn't move, but her jaw tightened. I walked off stage, heart pounding. For once, I hadn't hidden behind whispers. I'd spoken aloud. Outside, the air was cool and sharp. I sat on the stone steps, staring at the quiet streetlights. I half expected Evelyn to follow me. She didn't. Instead, I heard the sound of her car engine starting. A moment later, it faded into the distance. And just like that, it was over. Or maybe it wasn't. Rumors die slowly. Sometimes they don't die at all. But that night, for the first time, I felt the faintest bit of peace. Not because I'd won, but because I'd stopped playing. I thought about my mother, Claire, her laughter, her warmth, the way she used to say, "The truth doesn't need to scream, Lily. It just needs to outlast the lie." Maybe that was the real revenge, not ruin, not humiliation, just truth. Standing quietly when everything else burned away. A month later, Evelyn sold her house. She left town without saying goodbye. People still talk about her, of course, about me too, but the words have softened over time, blurred by distance and memory. Sometimes I walk past the old church, where the wind catches in the eaves and the bells echo faintly. It sounds almost like a whisper, and I can't tell anymore if it's hers or mine. Revenge doesn't end with silence. It ends when you finally stop needing to be heard.